There are weapons built from steel. There are weapons built from science. But the most terrifying weapon ever created was built from a human being. Someone who once dreamed of changing the world, and instead choose to destroy it. What you are about to hear is not just a story of heroes and villains. It is a story about obsession, betrayal, and the question that haunts every powerful mind. What happens when genius is poisoned by envy, somewhere beneath the frozen soil of Russia? During one of history's darkest chapters, something was awakened that should never have been touched, and by the time the world noticed, it was almost too late. The era was the Cold War, a time when shadows held more power than armies. Deep within the heart of Russia, hidden from maps and erased from official records, a secret organization called Patriot operated in silence. Its mission was simple in theory, but monstrous in execution: to forge human beings into weapons. Scientists worked without sleep, conducting experiments on living subjects, pushing flesh and blood to limits nature never intended. Many of those experiments ended in tragedy. Lives were lost without ceremony, without record, without remorse. But buried among the failures were extraordinary successes, individuals who emerged from darkness with abilities that defied everything known to man. For a brief moment, it seemed like Patriot had achieved the impossible. Then the laboratory exploded, and everything vanished in fire and smoke. But not everyone died that day. That was precisely the problem. While Russia was simultaneously testing its most advanced artificial intelligence machines, robotic soldiers designed to be the perfect army, something went wrong in a way no one had predicted. Tanks rolled, helicopters circled, officers monitored their creation with pride, and then, without warning, the machines turned. The robots attacked their own forces with cold, mechanical precision. Every military vehicle in the area was reduced to burning wreckage. Every officer and technician present was killed. There was no malfunction. There was no accident. Someone was controlling them. Someone who had merged his own mind with the power of machines. That someone was Dr. Algus, once a respected scientist within Patriot. Algus had carried a wound inside him for decades. A wound made not from a blade, but from failure and jealousy. His project, Algus Model 1, was designed to control any electrical machine through a remote signal. When it failed, Patriot shut him down completely. But what truly broke him was watching Professor Victor succeed. Victor was turning humans into superheroes, and the world was applauding him. Algus could not bear it. Consumed by rage, he stole Victor's research, left blood on his hands in the process, and was eventually captured and imprisoned. Prison, however, could not hold a mind like his for long. He escaped, he vanished, and when the military finally located him, they walked straight into his trap. The bomb he had planted in his old laboratory detonated the moment the soldiers entered. The entire building collapsed in a wall of fire. Every soldier inside was killed instantly. The Ministry of Defense declared him dead and closed the file. But the truth was far more disturbing. Algus had survived, changed, damaged, and reborn. The chemical explosion had altered his body at a molecular level, and in that destruction, he found his greatest opportunity. He performed one final experiment on himself, transforming his body into a fusion of flesh and machinery. He became a cyborg, a being capable of controlling any machine with nothing more than a thought. And now, he had an army. The Ministry of Defense convened in urgency. Walls of classified files were reopened. Old names surfaced like ghosts. The decision was made to reactivate Patriot and place it under the command of Major Eleanor, sharp, disciplined, driven by a sense of duty that left no room for doubt. Her mission was to find the Guardians. The superheroes born from Patriots' experiments decades ago, because they were the only ones powerful enough to stand against what Algus had become. Eleanor assembled her team and began the search. What she found was not a group of willing heroes. It was a collection of broken, isolated souls. They had spent years running from what they were. The first was Lars, living like a monk in an ancient Armenian temple, far from the noise of a world that feared what it didn't understand. He refused Eleanor's request without hesitation, but when she spoke the name Algus, something shifted behind his eyes. Lars lifted enormous stones from the earth and launched them like missiles. A demonstration of rage he had kept buried for years. That rage was not just power. It was purpose. He agreed to return. The second Guardian was Con, discovered in a blur of motion and blades. Agents sent to find him barely had time to blink before their vehicles were cut in half. Con moved like lightning, wrapped in silence. When Lars stood before him and spoke of revenge, no words were needed. Con simply stepped forward. In the frozen wilderness of Siberia, the third Guardian, Eros, was hiding in an abandoned cabin, wrestling with the beast that lived inside him. When soldiers approached, that beast answered. Eros transformed into something enormous and terrifying, tearing through the military presence like paper. It was only the sight of familiar faces and the promise of justice against Algus that pulled him back. And in Moscow, beneath the lights of a circus stage, the fourth Guardian performed for crowds who had no idea what they were watching. Xenia, a young woman who could vanish into water like a ghost, had been living in hiding, changing cities, changing names, always one step ahead of a world that would not understand her. When Con appeared in her dressing room, she attacked without hesitation. It took Lars and Eros together to convince her to listen. At headquarters, Xenia revealed the truth she had carried alone for decades. Her earliest memory was the year 1978. Everything before it was gone, erased as completely as a page torn from a book. She had been found near a pool and identified, with nothing but a ring on her finger. Doctors promised her memory would return. It never did. She had not aged a single day in 40 years, and that very fact had forced her into a life of constant hiding. She could vanish into water, regulate her body temperature like a switch, and move unseen through the world. But she had never been able to find the one thing she wanted most, herself. The moment of action arrived sooner than expected. Algus had been located. Hiding inside a massive junkyard, he had transformed into a fortress of steel and shadow. The Guardians moved out immediately. Rain began to fall as they arrived. Xenia dissolved into it like mist, moving forward unseen. The others split apart and closed in from different directions. Then the connection to headquarters went dark, and everything unraveled at once. Algus had prepared for them. His guards were equipped with weapons specifically engineered to neutralize each Guardian's ability. Xenia was detected by thermal sensors and frozen where she stood. Con was injected with a serum that dropped him unconscious before he could react. Eros was cornered and captured. Lars fought the hardest, covering himself in stone, splitting the ground with his fists. But when Algus himself appeared, every blow Lars landed meant nothing. Algus dismantled Lars with terrifying efficiency, breaking him and forcing him to his knees. Then he locked all four Guardians inside a magnetically sealed chamber, and stood before them with the calm of someone who had already won. He told them he had known they were coming. He had planned for them, and then he offered them a place in his vision. Eros refused, so Algus walked away and unleashed his stolen army upon Moscow. The city erupted into chaos. Military tanks controlled by no human hand rolled through streets. People fled. Buildings burned. News broadcasts scrambled to explain what was happening. But no explanation existed that made sense to anyone watching. Deep within this horror, a darker truth emerged. Major General Nikolai, the very man who had ordered the mission to stop Algus, had secretly made a deal with him in exchange for delivering the Guardians. Nikolai believed he had secured his safety. Algus killed him without a second thought. His goal was never simply revenge. He wanted the world, every satellite, every machine, every system under his control. To achieve it, he had one final step: connecting to massive transmission towers to relay a signal into space. Once activated, no technology on Earth would be beyond his reach. Back at headquarters, Lars regained consciousness in pain, both physical and emotional. While unconscious, he had relived a vision that cut deeper than any wound. Watching his daughter grow old and die, year by year, while he remained unchanged. That grief lived in his face as he opened his eyes. Then Professor Victor appeared, the man who had created the Guardians, who had lived in hiding since the explosion, who had watched the world from a distance and finally decided he could no longer stay silent. He treated Lars and handed Eleanor the information she needed to find Algus's laboratory. The Guardians were rescued, but as they reunited, Eros admitted something that haunted him. He could feel himself slipping deeper into the beast. Every day, he feared that one morning he would wake up and the man inside him would be gone forever. Eleanor gave them more than hope. She gave them armor, designed specifically for each Guardian. The new suits and weapons were built to amplify what they already were. Eris received an automatic cannon linked directly to his nervous system, firing wherever his mind directed. Xenia's suit allowed her to disappear anywhere, at any time, taking whatever she touched with her into invisibility. Lars received stone whips, extensions of his power that cracked through the air like thunder, and Khan's new blades were sharper than anything that had come before. His suit impenetrable to bullets and injections. They trained. They pushed themselves past exhaustion and into something beyond it, and when they were ready, they moved. The final battle was not clean or easy or heroic in the way stories often pretend. It was brutal. It was desperate. Algus had grown into something that barely resembled the man he had once been. He absorbed attacks, redirected weapons, and dismantled the Guardians one strike at a time. He seized Eris's cannon with his mind and shut it down. He grabbed Lars's electric whip and threw him like a ragdoll. He hurled Khan skyward with terrifying force. Even the military missiles aimed at the towers were intercepted midair and destroyed. For one terrible moment, it seemed like nothing they had would be enough. Then Eleanor's voice cut through the noise, reminding them of Professor Victor's final words. Their greatest power was not individual. It was collective, united. Their combined energy could produce something even Algus could not withstand. The Guardians gathered in the river below, battered and bleeding, and they gave everything they had left to Lars. He absorbed it all, a torrent of power that built, and built until his entire body became a conduit of pure energy. And then he released it toward the towers. The explosion that followed was visible from miles away. Both towers collapsed in fire and ruin. Dr. Algus was gone. Moscow was saved. The news reported an unknown enemy defeated by an unknown force. The Guardians remained exactly that: unknown, unnamed, unacknowledged. As the dust settled and the fires cooled, Eleanor stood before each of them and said what needed to be said. Not as a commander to soldiers, but as one human being to another. Xenia, in the quiet that followed, felt something shift inside her mind, like a door that had been locked for 40 years finally swinging open. Her memories returned, flooding back in a wave of color and sound. and faces she had almost forgotten how to recognize. She stood in the stillness and, for the first time in decades, she remembered who she was. And as the Guardians prepared to go their separate ways, Ellen looked out at the horizon and said quietly that there were others still out there. More Guardians, still hidden, still waiting. The story, it turned out, was far from over.